The crystal chandelier above glowed like 1,000 silent witnesses, casting fractured light over velvet drapes and untouched wine glasses. The air inside the ballroom felt heavy, too polished, too perfect, like a cage wrapped in silk. I moved between tables with the quiet precision of someone who knew how to disappear. 12-hour shifts had taught me not to make eye contact, not to linger, not to exist more than necessary. The black and white of my uniform had faded into shades of exhaustion, and my shoes, cracked at the sole, whispered secrets with every step. Someone snapped their fingers for more champagne. I nodded, as always, and obeyed. But then I saw him. He wasn't seated like the others, not indulging, not laughing. He stood in the far corner, a carved statue of fury and restraint in a cobalt blue suit. His golden eyes tracked the room like a predator too bored to hunt. Still, something in his stance made the air shift, made my heart stutter like glass about to break. And then it did. A crash, a scream, the tray tipped, crystal flutes spun in the air, and I ran, straight toward him. The chandelier's light shimmered like a false sun above my head as I weaved between the tables, my tray balanced with the delicate discipline of someone used to being invisible. Ethria Hall was all polished elegance, velvet-lined chairs, crystal glasses, knives so sharp they could divide pride from privilege. But none of it ever touched me. I was the girl in the background, the one who refilled glasses and disappeared before the sparkle in them dimmed. The floor beneath my feet gleamed with the effort of others, my shoes slipping just slightly with each careful step, soles worn to memory. I didn't complain. I didn't exist loudly enough for that. "Table 3 wants their wine chilled, not breath warm," Melina hissed as she passed me in the hallway near the kitchens, her own tray stacked with desserts no one would eat. I nodded without answering. There was no point. You learned not to speak unless asked, and certainly not when you were the one who had to stitch your uniform back together at night. You learned how to glide, not stomp. You learned to fold your shoulders so small they didn't brush against anyone else's ego. I moved through the ballroom like a wisp of breath, a living ghost. The guests wore black diamonds and arrogance. The women's laughter was light and rehearsed, and the men, always heavier, always louder, spread their presence like perfume and smoke. None of them looked at me, not really. Their eyes passed through me like I was part of the furniture. I knew the drill. That was the whole point of a girl like me. Pretty enough to serve, forgettable enough to disappear. But he saw me. I felt it first, like a hot pulse on the side of my neck, like the moment you realize you're not alone in a dark hallway. I turned, heart leaping into my throat, and found him. He was seated alone at a half-shadowed corner table, untouched wineglass in front of him, one arm draped over the chair like it belonged to him, the way stars belong to the night sky. His hair was long, dark, falling over broad shoulders, clad in a suit the color of midnight lightning. But it was his eyes that held me. They weren't brown. They weren't hazel. They were gold. True molten gold, and they didn't flinch when I caught them. They didn't dart away like most men's eyes did when caught watching. No. He looked at me like he already knew how the chapter ended. A flush crept over the back of my neck, ridiculous and immediate. I turned away, focused on balancing the bottle of champagne I held in one hand. I had work to do, tips to earn, rent to pay, no time to blush over men who looked like they'd walked out of fevered myth. Still, I felt him watching. I delivered drinks, cleared plates, avoided the hostess, who always found reasons to slash my tips if I wasn't quick enough with a smile. Every time I glanced up, I found his gaze again, unwavering, not unkind, just intense. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he thought I looked like someone else. Maybe he was bored. Maybe that golden heat was just my tired imagination trying to light sparks in a dim life. And then the tray fell. It happened so fast it felt like a slow-motion dream. A waitress near the bar slipped, I saw the arc of the tray, a constellation of flutes pirouetting through the air. The world gasped around me. A dozen hands froze. No one moved, except me. The table behind the crash was his. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. I didn't think. There wasn't time to think. My tray dropped, crashing against the floor with a splash of champagne. I pushed through the crowd, my heart beat a wild animal caged behind my ribs. The glasses were still falling, still turning in the air like shining knives. He hadn't moved, but I had. I launched myself across the space, arms stretched out. I didn't know what I was doing until I did it. I was between him and the glass in the heartbeat before they struck. My back arched as I turned toward the shatter. Trying to take the brunt, there was a sharp crack, a hot sting. Then silence. I felt the blood first, warm, sticky, sliding down my shoulder. The pain bloomed next, hot and sharp. My breath caught, my knees hit the floor. I was vaguely aware of a cry. Mine or someone else's, I couldn't say. And then he was behind me. His hands caught me before I could fully crumple. They were strong, surprisingly gentle. I felt the heat of him at my back, the scent of something wild and ancient curling into my lungs, pine, earth, and smoke. His voice was low and steady, meant only for me. Don't move. I didn't dare. Couldn't, really. I felt something else then, a shift in the air, like everything had stopped. Like the world had narrowed down to me, him, and the blood running from my shoulder. He turned me gently in his arms, cradling me as if I were something fragile and rare. I was aware of people gasping, of someone shouting for help, but it all felt distant, unreal. Only his eyes were real. "Why did you do that?" he asked softly, his gaze fixed on mine. I tried to speak, but my throat had closed. My hands shook. I could feel the cut on my back. It wasn't superficial. I should have screamed, should have cried, but I didn't. "You could have been killed," he said. "You didn't move," I whispered. He stared at me for a long beat, and then, with impossible tenderness, he brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. His thumb traced the curve of my jaw, and something in me cracked open, something I didn't know was still capable of being reached. "You're bleeding," he murmured. I nodded, blinking away the sudden sting in my eyes, and then he leaned in. At first, I thought he was going to whisper something else. Another question. A command. But his lips brushed my shoulder, just above the wound, and I felt a jolt of something electric race through my body. His breath was warm, his lips cool, and then the pain stopped, not eased, not dulled. Stopped. I gasped, pulling back slightly, but he held me still, his hand pressed against the curve of my spine. A low heat bloomed in the wound. My skin itched, then pulsed, and then sealed. My breath caught again. I stared at him, too stunned to speak. His expression didn't change, but his eyes had darkened, still gold, but now storm-touched. There was something feral lurking beneath the surface, something ancient. Something that had chosen me. I was no longer invisible, and that terrified me more than the glass ever could. The scream hadn't finished echoing when instinct took over. I ran. The tray was already tilting, a flash of silver and crystal spinning mid-air. Champagne sparkled in the light, droplets suspended in time like fireflies. The glasses, tall, thin, lethal, tumbled in a deadly arc toward the far corner, the one where he sat alone. Kyle. Everyone else froze. Their eyes widened. Some gasped. Some lifted their hands as if the sound alone might ward off the inevitable. But no one moved. Except me. My body cut through the space between the tables in a blur of motion I didn't fully understand. I wasn't fast. I wasn't trained. But something ancient, something louder than fear, shoved me forward. Kyle hadn't moved. He sat, still and poised, as if he'd known this was coming, as if waiting to see what I would do. I didn't understand why. Not yet. But I dove, arms stretched, body twisting, a cry lodged in my throat as my feet left the ground and I collided with him. Then the glass came down. It shattered across my back like a scream in a cathedral. White-hot pain bloomed as shards cut through fabric, skin, muscle. It was sharp, precise, surgical in its cruelty. The heat of blood spread across my spine, thick and immediate. I felt something slice into the meat of my shoulder. I cried out, the sound raw and instinctive. He caught me. Kael's hands were already there, strong and cold and terribly steady, wrapping around my waist as I collapsed into him. I trembled, teeth clenched, the world spinning in streaks of candlelight and blood. My knees hit the ground, but I wasn't alone. He pulled me down with him. No one in the room moved. No one dared. His voice was the first sound I heard again. Low, guttural, a command wrapped in velvet. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." I tried to breathe, but the pain was sharp and constant. Like every inhale dragged glass deeper. My vision blurred at the edges. I tried to speak, but my voice came out in a broken gasp. His fingers pressed to my cheek, grounding me. "Don't move," he said again. "I have you." I should have passed out. Maybe I did for a second, because the next thing I knew I was curled in his lap, my head against his chest, his scent surrounding me, wood smoke, rain, wildness. The room hulsed around us. People whispered. Someone sobbed. Somewhere near the kitchen I heard someone retching. But Kael didn't look at them. He looked at me, and then he leaned down. His lips brushed my skin just above where the worst of the glass had cut. The touch sent a shiver down my spine, not of pain, but something else. Something older, something wrong and right all at once. A strange heat spiraled out from that point. It moved through my nerves like wildfire, burning away the pain, replacing it with pressure, and then stillness. The wound sealed beneath his lips. My breath caught. I didn't understand what was happening. I only knew that the fire on my back had gone out. The world narrowed to him, his hands, his mouth, his power. Kael drew back slowly, and when I looked at him, I saw something behind his eyes. Something more than man, more than alpha. Something ancient. The air between us shifted, thickened. I became aware of the silence around us, dense and loaded. It pressed in from all sides, like the walls themselves were listening, and then it hit me. He had kissed me, but not just a kiss, a healing, a rite. My skin tingled where his mouth had been. I shifted, tried to sit up, but his hand came to my waist, holding me still, gentle but firm. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured, eyes locked to mine. "You didn't know what it meant." "What did it mean?" I whispered. His jaw tightened. "It means you're mine now." I blinked. "I don't understand." "You will." The hush of the crowd around us finally cracked when someone whispered his name, barely audible, like speaking it too loud might summon something dangerous. "Kael." He didn't flinch. He didn't even glance their way. The name felt like a storm held behind syllables. And suddenly it all made sense, the way the air obeyed him, the way shadows leaned toward his footsteps. Kael, the Alpha King, and I had just flung myself over his body like a shield. My knees wobbled, my thoughts scrambled, trying to piece together how I got here. I'd been invisible. A girl in the background, a server, a shadow. Now I was in his lap. Now I was bleeding, or I had been. Now I was healed by his mouth. Now I was something else. He moved, finally, shifting to rise, one arm still around me. I tried to protest, but the pain was gone, and my voice betrayed me. All I could do was clutch his suit jacket as he rose to his full height, holding me like I weighed nothing. The gasps around us grew louder. He ignored them. He looked only at me. I tried to speak again, to ask what had happened, what he meant when he said I was his, but his expression silenced me. It wasn't cold. It was reverent, reverent and furious. "Someone did this on purpose," he said, low and sure, like it wasn't a guess, but a law he'd already passed judgment on. He turned toward the door, and the crowd parted without needing to be told. I glanced over his shoulder and saw the floor where I had fallen, glass glinting, blood smeared across marble like paint. It didn't feel real, but I felt real in his arms. Too real. And when he looked down at me again, something in his gaze told me, whatever had begun here tonight wasn't over. Whatever bond he'd sealed with his kiss, it had changed everything. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the silence of the restaurant after the crash, or the stunned hush of a room holding its breath, but a different kind entirely. A stillness so complete it felt alive, like the walls were listening, like even the air was waiting for me to wake. I lay wrapped in linen soft enough to make my fingertips ache. The sheets beneath me whispered like water when I shifted, and the mattress cradled me as if I'd never known the sharp edge of a floor. My body was warm. My back, my shoulder, no longer throbbed, no fire, no sting, only a strange residual ache, as if pain had been there and decided to leave without saying goodbye. The room was enormous. Dark wood beams crossed the ceiling like ancient arms. A fireplace glowed on the far side of the chamber, where the light danced against stone and threw flickering shadows across walls lined with towering bookshelves. Heavy velvet curtains draped tall windows, but a sliver of twilight bled through the edges, a soft violet glow that painted the world in bruised hues. I wasn't in my apartment. I wasn't in the restaurant. I was somewhere else entirely. I sat up too quickly. The motion sent a ripple through my chest, not of pain, but memory, the sound of breaking glass, the rush of movement, blood, cold hands, a kiss that burned and healed at once. Kyle. The name hit me like thunder underwater. Before I could piece the thought together, the door creaked open. He filled the frame like a shadow stepped free of the night. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. His suit jacket was gone now, sleeves rolled back, and the top buttons of his dark shirt undone. His hair fell loose around his shoulders. He looked untamed, unapologetic. Alpha, in the truest sense of the word. But his eyes softened when they found me awake. "You're safe," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact he had decided. My lips parted, but no words came. I tried again. "Where am I?" "My home," he said. "The Hall of Thornhill." That meant nothing to me. But it sounded like it should, like it belonged in legend, or a prophecy no one remembered how to translate. "I brought you here," he added, stepping fully into the room. "You passed out after the healing. Your body was overwhelmed." I could only imagine. My body had been pierced, torn. I should have been in a hospital, but I wasn't. I touched my shoulder, the skin smooth, unmarred. The pain was gone, completely gone. "How?" I started, voice hoarse. He moved closer, slow, unthreatening, but magnetic. There was a weight to the air as he neared, something that pressed against the edges of me, testing for cracks. "What happened last night wasn't just instinct," he said. "What you did, it forged something between us." I frowned. "I don't understand." He took a breath, as if searching for the right words, then sat in the chair beside the bed, his gaze unwavering. "There are very few things in this world that can't be broken," he said. "Time, loyalty, power, even blood can betray you." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "But instinct, that kind of instinct, the kind that makes a human woman throw herself over an alpha king without thinking, that is rare. Sacred." "I didn't know who you were," I murmured. "I didn't even think. I just saw the glass and you moved," he finished. "You put yourself between danger and me, not out of duty, not because you were ordered, but because something inside you recognized something inside me." I didn't know what to say to that. It sounded beautiful and terrifying. He studied me for a long moment. There's an ancient law, older than any council, older than even the packs themselves. When a soul offers itself freely in protection of another, when blood is spilled in the act, it opens a bond. My breath caught. A bond? His nod was slow, deliberate. A soul thread, between the protector and the protected. And if the protected responds, if he seals it with his own gift. He looked at me, something fierce flickering beneath the surface. Then the bond becomes permanent. The kiss, the healing, my heart slammed once against my ribs. You sealed it. He didn't look away. Yes. I couldn't breathe. Why? He rose then, coming to the edge of the bed, close enough for the scent of him to wrap around me. Smoke, cedar, and something electric. Because something in you called to something in me, he said. And because what you did wasn't survival. It was sacrifice. Your instinct answered mine before either of us could name it. He lifted his hand, reaching slowly. I didn't stop him. His fingers brushed my shoulder, the spot where the wound had been. I flinched, not from pain, but from the jolt of warmth that sparked beneath his touch. I didn't mean for this, I whispered. I know, he said gently, but it chose us anyway. I closed my eyes, trying to slow the pulse roaring in my ears. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't understood any of it, and yet, my body remembered the way his arms had held me. My skin remembered the feel of his breath as it healed me. My soul felt tethered, like gravity had shifted. What does it mean? I asked. This bond. Kyl's gaze darkened. It means you're not invisible anymore. Not to me. Not to my kind. It means you'll be hunted for the thread that now ties you to me. It means you're mine. And it means I will protect you with every ounce of power I have. A chill traced my spine, even as warmth curled in my chest. Not fear, never fear, but the sheer scale of what he said, of what had been created between us in a moment born of chaos. He knelt beside the bed, eyes level with mine now. You can reject it, he said quietly. The bond. I won't force it. But if you do, I won't be able to protect you from what's coming. From those who will see you not as a waitress, but as a threat or a weapon. I searched his face, trying to find a lie. There wasn't one. You still think I'm just a girl who served drinks? I said softly. No, he said. I think you're a girl who shattered fate with a heartbeat. And I think that somewhere deep down, you've always known you were meant for more. My throat closed. He didn't ask again. He didn't press. He simply stood, gave one last glance that felt like it saw too much, and turned toward the door. But before he stepped through it, I heard him speak again, quiet, certain. You're in my world now, Jane, and nothing will ever be the same again. The sun hadn't risen, but the sky outside Kyl's estate bled silver through the curtains, soft and sharp at once, like the moment before a blade touches skin. I sat at the edge of the enormous bed, lacing my fingers together to still the quiet tremble in them. The silk nightdress someone had dressed me in felt too delicate for my frame, as if it might rip with a single breath too deep. My back, once torn by glass, felt whole. My body was rested, but inside me, something restless stirred. Something I couldn't name yet, but it beat beneath my skin like a second heart. Kyle hadn't returned since last night, but someone had left clothes for me. Not a uniform, not something to blend into the background with. This was soft, dark fabric that clung gently to my shape without choking it. The sleeves were long, the collar lined with quiet embroidery in a symbol I didn't recognize but instinctively knew wasn't just decoration. I put it on, even though every cell in my body whispered I didn't belong. A knock came just after dawn, soft, precise. Not a servant's knock, but someone who knew they didn't need permission to enter. The woman who stepped through the door looked carved from frost. Her dark hair was braided back tightly, every line of her face sharp with control. She wore black from neck to heel, and the pin at her collar matched the symbol on my tunic. "You're awake," she said, not unkindly. "Good, they're waiting." "Who's they?" I asked, standing a little too fast. "The ones who want to know what the Alpha has brought home," she replied, "and whether you'll break us or save us." I didn't have an answer for that. I followed her through the halls, each step echoing against stone and silence. The estate was massive, ancient. It didn't smell like dust or disuse, but like firelight and damp moss, as if the bones of the building had been carved from the mountain itself. As we walked, I noticed doors that pulsed faintly with warmth as we passed. Warded, I realized. Protected. Magic lived in the seams here. She led me through a pair of arched doors and into a long chamber with vaulted ceilings and a heavy wooden table that could have seated 20. Only 6 people were there. Kael stood at the head. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted when he saw me. Not relief. Something deeper. Like acknowledgement. I stepped closer. "This is Jane," he said simply. "The one who carries the bond." It was not an introduction. It was a statement of status. The others studied me with eyes far sharper than human. I recognized it immediately. Power, cloaked in silence. They didn't need to flex to prove their strength. They already knew it. A man with thick arms and a scar down one side of his face leaned forward. "You're human." "Last I checked," I said. A flicker of amusement passed through Kael's eyes. "She doesn't know the laws," the man continued. "She doesn't know what this bond means, not just for her, but for us, for all of us." "She will," Kael said. "Today." The woman who had brought me in moved to stand at Kael's right side. "I'm Mira," she said, this time with a hint of warmth. "I was once where you are now, new to this world, unaware of how quickly it can burn." "Burn?" I echoed. "The bond you share with Kael is real," she said, "and sacred. But it's also dangerous." Kael motioned for me to sit. I did, though the seat felt too big beneath me. He remained standing, his hands braced on the edge of the table. "There are 6 ruling packs across the regions," he began, "each with their own alpha, each with their own laws. I rule the Nightborn pack, the strongest, the oldest, but strength invites enemies." Mira continued, her voice measured. "Some see your bond with Kael as a gift, a sign of fate choosing to stir. Others will see it as a vulnerability." "Because I'm not one of you," I said. Kael's gaze landed on me. "Because you weren't chosen by blood. You were chosen by instinct. And that," Mira added, "frightens people more than any prophecy." I looked around the table. "So I'm what? A threat? A liability?" "You're both," the scarred man said flatly, "but only if we let you be." "Ruvan," Kael said sharply. Just the name, but it held enough power to make the man fall silent. Kael turned back to me. "Rival packs have already heard what happened at the restaurant. They know you protected me. They know I healed you with the old rite." "Wait, how?" I asked. "That was less than a day ago." "Wolves," Mira said, "have very long ears." Kael's mouth was a hard line. "Some will want to challenge me. Use you as an excuse. They'll claim I've weakened the throne, that I let emotion cloud blood." I swallowed. "But that's not what happened." "No," Kael agreed, "but they'll make it the story." I stared at the flickering candle in the center of the table. The flame wavered, fragile, like me. What happens now? Kael came around the table and crouched beside my chair. His voice dropped low, meant only for me. "We prepare you. We teach you the laws, the language, the signals, everything they'll expect you to fail at. I met his eyes. And if I do fail, then they'll come for you first, and me second. The weight of it pressed down like snowfall, quiet and total. But you won't fail, he added, because I won't let you. I believed him. I didn't know why I did, but I did. The others began to speak, of territory lines and old rivalries, of a pack in the eastern range already stirring with unrest. Mira spoke of the rites I would need to observe, the ceremonies, the deference expected of an alpha's claimed bond. Ruvan warned that being marked didn't make me untouchable. It made me visible. And the visible were always the first to bleed. I listened, I asked, I learned. And when the meeting ended, I stood on legs that felt more certain than they had the day before. Because I understood something now. I wasn't just the girl who had thrown herself into the fire. I was the spark that had changed the whole forest, and they would either learn to respect me or choke on the smoke I left behind. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a trick of the mirror. I stood in the washroom, steam curling off my skin in silken threads, a towel wrapped tight around me. The air smelled of mountain herbs and something sweeter, like the scent of Kael's jacket when he passed too close. I had just stepped out of the shower when I caught the shimmer in the glass. A faint gleam, like moonlight, caught beneath my skin. I turned slowly, heart already climbing into my throat. And there it was. Low on my shoulder blade, where the glass had cut deepest, where his mouth had sealed my skin with that strange burning kiss, was a mark. Not a scar, a mark. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat made of light. Not white, not gold, but something in between, like a color only wolves could name. I reached back, fingers brushing over smooth flesh. It didn't hurt, but the moment I touched it, something inside me fluttered, like wings opening in a place I didn't know I had. I pulled my shirt down, turned back to the mirror. The glow faded, soft as breath, but it was still there. Later, I found Mira in the library, her hands trailing over a worn book so old the pages had gone gray with time. "It's glowing," I said. No greeting, no explanation, just that. She didn't ask what I meant. She only looked at me, quietly, fully, and nodded. The bond chose to leave a mark. "That's not normal, is it?" "No," she said, and closed the book. "It's very rare, and very dangerous." I sat beside her on the bench beneath the window, the air cool against the back of my neck. "What does it mean?" Mira hesitated, eyes scanning the stained glass reflection in the floor before she spoke. "There's a legend, old even for our kind, about a human who would walk into the wolf's den with no armor, no blood ties, and no fear. She would protect an alpha not with fang or blade, but with something older, something more primal. "Instinct," I whispered. She nodded, and the gods would mark her, not with pain, but with light. The silence between us filled with ghosts. They called her the soulbound flame. I tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. That sounds like something from a fairy tale. All our truths began as stories someone was too afraid to believe. I touched my shoulder again, as if the pressure might erase it. "Kael knows," I said. It wasn't a question. "Doesn't he?" "He does," she said. "He saw it the moment it bloomed." I should have felt comforted. Instead, I felt exposed, seen in a way that made my bones ache. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. Not just bonded to the Alpha King, I was something else. Something people whispered about in rooms like this, beneath high arches and old glass, in the shadows where war brewed. It was already happening. The next day, the guards doubled at the gates. By the second, Ruvan left mid-meeting, his voice low and tense as he took a call that left the color drained from his face. By the third, I wasn't allowed to walk the outer halls without someone trailing behind me. "They're moving," Kyle told me that night. His fingers laced through mine as we stood at the edge of the terrace. The forest below us pulsed with wolf song, distant howls echoing through the trees like a storm rolling in. Who is? The Hollowfangs, the Sable-Bloods, rogues who never accepted the order I brought to the courts. They see the bond, the mark. They see you. And they think this is their chance to strike. I leaned into him, the chill of night curling through my sleeves. Because I'm human. Because you're changing everything. His voice was soft, but it held the weight of iron. I looked up at him, this man carved from old storms and battle scars, and saw the flicker of something he tried to hide. Fear. Not for himself, for me. Then let them come, I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They will. We didn't sleep that night. The estate changed in ways I couldn't see but felt. Whispers traveled through the stone walls like smoke. Messengers came and went at hours that defied the sun. A set of ancient wolves, Kyle's old guard, arrived from the north, their eyes wild and unreadable, their weapons older than the country I was born in. They bowed to Kyle, and then to me. "You carry the flame," one of them said, voice like cracked ice. "We serve." I didn't know what to say to that. I still didn't know what I was becoming. The mark grew brighter as the days passed. Only when I was alone. Only when I wasn't trying to force it. I'd catch a glimpse in the mirror, or feel it pulse like something beneath my skin was listening. A presence. A tether. Sometimes, I wondered if Kyle could feel it too. He didn't say, but I knew. I saw it in the way he touched my back now, with reverence. Like he was afraid to bruise the light there. Like he thought it didn't belong to him, but to something greater, something he wasn't allowed to claim. "You're not mine," he said once, as we stood in the stillness before dawn. "You're something the gods stole from the stars and slipped into my hands when I wasn't looking." I should have laughed, teased him, but all I could do was lean my head against his shoulder and listen to the steady, quiet thunder of his heartbeat. It was the only thing that calmed the storm inside me. But it didn't last. The attack came 2 nights later. Not on the estate, but near the border. 2 scouts killed. One returned barely breathing, slashed across the chest, his eyes glowing with panic. "They're here," he rasped. "The Hollowfangs. 20 at least. They're not trying to hide." The war room roared to life. Weapons were drawn from vaults beneath the floor, orders issued in low, sharp voices. Ruvan called for reinforcements. Mira readied the east wing for lockdown. Kyle didn't raise his voice once, but the moment he gave a command, the earth seemed to listen. And me? I stood still. Not because I was afraid, but because the mark on my back had begun to burn. Not with pain, with purpose. Something ancient stirred behind my ribs, something that had waited a very long time to wake up, and it whispered, in a voice older than Kyle's bloodline, older than wolves and kings. "They're not coming for a girl. They're coming for the fire. And this time, the fire is ready." The sky broke open just before dusk. It wasn't a storm, at least not the kind that came with rain or thunder. This was something deeper. The kind of pressure that settled into bone. It moved through the trees like a held breath, made the wolves along the border tense, made Kyle rise from his chair with his jaw clenched and his hands curled into fists. "They're here," Ruvan said, already strapping weapons to his belt. "Right on schedule." The east fields, where the land dipped into black pines and fog, had gone too quiet. Kyle didn't speak for a long moment. He just stared out the window, his silhouette drawn sharp against the fading light. The mark on my back had begun to pulse again, steadier now, stronger. I could feel it echoing beneath my ribs, as if warning me, as if calling something home. I stepped closer. "Who is it?" Kyle's voice was low, lethal. "Magnar." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Mira swore under her breath told me everything I needed to know. He's a rogue? I asked. He was an alpha, Kyle said, stripped of his title, banished for blood treachery. And now he wants your seat. He wants the crown, Mira added, but he'll take your head first. The silence that followed was brittle. The kind that cracks before it explodes. I touched Kyle's arm. He didn't move. What do we do? His eyes found mine. The gold in them was darker now, storm-lit. I meet him, he said. On the stones, no one else. That's the law. My blood chilled. He wants to fight you. He wants to humiliate me, to show the other packs that I've weakened, that taking a human bond has made me vulnerable. And has it? No, he said. But that doesn't matter if they believe it has. He left then, not to prepare. Kyle didn't need to. He was always prepared. He carried war in his spine. Mira pulled me aside before I could follow. Her grip was tighter than usual. You stay inside, she said. Don't argue, don't try to help. If you step onto that stone field, you'll break the law, and he'll lose his right to fight. I nodded. But something already felt wrong. Not fear, not yet, but that pressure in the air. It hadn't lifted. It had just shifted. The estate was on high alert. Wolves lined the perimeter, eyes glowing through the trees. The pack was quiet, but not calm, the kind of silence that precedes instinct, that sits behind the teeth, ready to bite. I stayed near the window, watching Kyle walk toward the clearing, toward the circle of stone that marked ancient territory law. Magna waited for him. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel the hunger in his stance, the greed. He didn't come to challenge. He came to destroy. The fight began, and I turned away, heart slamming against my chest, unable to bear the sight. I shouldn't have turned. The moment I looked away, the world shifted again. Fast, sharp, wrong. Hands grabbed me from behind. 3 of them, fast, trained. One pressed a blade against my side, while the other 2 locked my arms and dragged me backwards through a side corridor I hadn't even noticed before. I didn't scream. There wasn't time. We moved fast, through a tunnel, down a spiral of stone so ancient it wept water from the cracks. The mark on my back burned hotter now, as if trying to reach Kyle, trying to send warning. I couldn't fight them. They were too strong. I didn't shift. I didn't howl. I was still human, still breakable. But I remembered what Kyle had said once, that being bonded didn't make me less. It made me seen. The thought snapped like flint in my chest. They didn't want to kill me. They wanted to use me. They dragged me through the forest, away from the lights of the estate, away from the stones. I fought with every ounce I had, kicked, bit, spit. But one of them slammed the hilt of a blade into my ribs, and the world tilted sideways. My knees hit the earth, my vision blurred. They threw me to the base of an ancient tree, its roots like claws wrapping the ground. "She's here," one of them growled. "Tell Magna." The other pulled something from his coat, a shard of bone, carved and slick with oil, and drove it into the dirt beside me. Magic thrummed in the ground, old, cold, and wrong. A sigil, a binding. I couldn't move. Back at the estate, Kyle would be fighting blind, and now I understood. It had never been about the fight. It had always been about me, a trap set under the guise of tradition. Kyle would never leave the stones, not while the fight continued. He'd follow the laws, and they were counting on that. Because they knew exactly what he'd do if he saw me taken. They were going to win with a lie. The mark on my back flared, sudden and bright, as if it knew the truth before I could. Kyle was in danger, and I was the reason. My hands clawed at the sigil, nails scraping over earth and bone. My body refused to obey, but my mind burned like fire now. Not with panic, but with will. I could feel him, not just in memory, not in metaphor, in blood. The thread between us pulled tight, vibrating like a scream, and then I heard him, not his voice, his roar, far away, echoing across the trees, deep and wild and furious. My captors froze. One of them cursed under his breath. Too late. Kyle came through the trees like a storm with teeth. Not in a suit, not in silence, but shifted, massive, midnight black. His wolf form towered, all muscle and shadow, eyes glowing like molten sun. He didn't slow. He tore through the first man with one swipe of his claw. The second tried to run. He didn't make it. The third reached for me. Kyle's jaws found his throat first, and then it was over. The clearing fell quiet again, but it wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Kyle shifted back slowly, the transformation raw and fast, like fire collapsing into a man's shape. Blood streaked his chest, his breaths came hard and deep, but when he looked at me, something else flared in his gaze. Terror. He dropped to his knees beside me, hands shaking as he touched the earth around the sigil. "It's okay," I whispered, voice raw. "I'm okay." "You weren't," he said. "They took you. You were in the fight." "I felt it," he snapped. "Through the bond. I felt you vanish." He pulled me into his arms like he was still unsure I was real. His mouth brushed the side of my face, my jaw, my temple. Not kisses, not entirely. Checks, assurances, ritual. "I told them not to underestimate you," I said, breath catching. He pulled back, just enough to meet my eyes. "They didn't," he said. "They used you because they knew how much you mattered." And somewhere in the back of my mind, even as I shook in his arms, I realized, so did I. He carried me through the forest like I weighed nothing, his body bloodied and bare, heat radiating from his skin like a furnace barely held together. I could feel it in his grip, the tension, the fury, the restraint, like something inside him hadn't fully shifted back, like the wolf was still right there beneath the surface, pacing behind his eyes, snarling for more. I should have been afraid. I wasn't. The bond between us thrummed with every step he took, threading warmth through my spine where it had once burned with light. I clung to him, half-conscious, not because I was weak, but because I could feel the rage in him still trying to break free. When he reached the gates of the estate, the guards stepped aside without a word. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look too long. They had seen Kyle angry. They had never seen him feral. Mira met us just inside the main hall, her eyes going wide at the blood smeared across his chest, most of it not his own, and the way his pupils still glowed faint gold, refusing to fade. "Get her to the sanctum," she said, voice taut. "Now." But Kyle didn't move. His arms tightened around me, jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. "She's not leaving my side," he said, voice like gravel dragged across steel. "Kyle," I said no. Something passed between them then, a history, perhaps, a recognition. Mira said nothing more. She simply stepped back, her eyes flicking to me once in quiet understanding. We went to his chamber. He laid me down carefully, as if I might crack open at the wrong angle. His hands hovered over my arms, my ribs, my jaw, not touching, just watching, assessing, still stuck in the primal language of violence and possession. "Breathe," I whispered. "I'm okay." He didn't answer. His fingers curled into fists. "Kyle, look at me." His eyes met mine, and there it was, raw and terrifying, the truth of what he'd become out there in the woods. Not just the alpha, not just a king, a creature unmade by fury, reformed by instinct. "You shouldn't have been taken," he said finally, the words shaking. "You shouldn't have." "I know," I said, "but I fought." He blinked. "I wasn't just a hostage. I tried. I hurt one of them. You could have died. But I didn't." I sat up, slowly, ignoring the way my body ached. "Because you came." His hands reached for me then, pulled me into him, and I let him hold me tight enough to bruise. Not because I needed to be protected, but because I needed him to remember I was still here, still whole, still mine. Later, when the blood had been washed from his skin and the tension in the halls had begun to settle, Kael sat beside the fire, silent and unreadable. I stood in the center of the room, staring into the mirror above the mantel. The mark on my back glowed brighter than ever. But that wasn't the only thing that had changed. There was something else now, a charge in the air when I moved. A pull in my chest I hadn't felt before. Mira had said it once, that the soul-bound flame was more than a myth. I'd laughed. But I wasn't laughing now. When I closed my eyes, I could still feel the moment one of the rogues had slammed me into the earth, the heat that had erupted beneath my skin. Not panic, not fear, but rage, pure and radiant. It had built in my chest like a second heartbeat and spilled from my fingers like fire. Not metaphorical, real. I'd burned him. I'd felt it, and I hadn't told Kael. Not yet. But I would. Because whatever this was inside me, whatever the mark had awakened, it was mine. The next day, the Hollowfangs sent a message. Not an apology, a warning. A strip of fabric, Kael's crest slashed through the center, and a piece of bone wrapped in black string. Mira cursed when she saw it. "They're not done." Kael only stared at the bone. "Let them come," he said, voice a growl barely tamed. "Let them see what happens when they threaten what's mine." I stepped forward, heart steady. "They didn't just threaten you," I said. "They used me." Kael's head turned sharply. "I'm not hiding anymore," I continued. "I want to fight." His jaw worked, something flickering behind his eyes. "No." I didn't flinch. "Why not?" "Because you're not ready. I'm not yours to protect like a treasure locked in a room." He rose to his full height. "No, you're not. You're mine to fight beside, but only when the fire inside you stops burning you up from the inside." I froze. He'd felt it, the power, the change. I looked away, shame crawling beneath my skin. I didn't mean for it to happen. He had his hand on my throat and Kael crossed the room in a blink, cupping my face in his hands. "You don't need to be afraid of what you are," he said. "You just need to learn how to wield it." I stared at him, breath shaking. "You're not the same girl who spilled champagne in a room full of monsters," he whispered. "You're something else now, something none of them expected." "Something dangerous," I said. He smiled then, a real smile, sharp, soft, reverent. "Yes," he said, "finally." And I smiled back, because I finally believed it too. The snow fell the morning Magnar was buried. It came silent and soft, like the world wanted to hide what had happened on the stones the night before. But nothing could cover it, not the blood that had stained the frost. Not the look in Kael's eyes when he stepped away from Magnar's broken body, chest rising and falling in deep, controlled rhythm, the old laws still echoing around him like thunder waiting for release. He hadn't just won, he'd ended it. The rogue Alpha hadn't bowed, so Kael made sure he never stood again. I watched from the ridge above the field. I hadn't been allowed to stand at his side for the challenge. It would have been a breach of tradition, a taint on the laws that held their world together by a thread. But I had felt every blow. I had felt it. Not just the bond, the thread that tied us together like a pulse in the dark, but something deeper now, something rooted in the mark that shimmered across my back, the soul-bound flame. Mira had stood beside me as Kael delivered the final strike, her breath misting in the frozen air. "It's over," she said. "You should be proud." I wasn't sure that was the word, but I nodded anyway. When we returned to the estate, the halls were quiet. Not somber, not mourning, just reverent. Every eye that met mine held something new, not pity, not confusion, but recognition, and for the first time since I arrived, No one looked through me. The pack lined the great hall that evening, the fires lit high in the sconces, the old banners hung from the beams, the floor cleared so that only two of us stood in its center, Kyle and me. His wounds were mostly gone. Wolf blood healed fast, and he'd refused the healer's touch, letting only time and pride mend what little Magnar had managed to break. He wore black, as always, but tonight it wasn't armor. It was ceremony. He didn't speak when he turned to face the others. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached for my hand. The room exhaled all at once. When I stepped forward, the torches flared. The mark on my back burned warm, not painful, just present, as if it had been waiting for this. Kyl's voice filled the hall, low and sure, every syllable deliberate, ancient. I offer her name to the stone. A hush fell like snow. I offer her flame to the bloodline. Mira stepped forward, holding a silver chalice I hadn't seen before. It shimmered with dark liquid, wine maybe, or something older. Kyle took it, drank once, then turned to me. And I offer my crown to her hands. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I felt the weight of what he was saying, even if the words were ritual. He wasn't just naming me. He was giving me everything. He held the chalice to my lips, and I drank. The taste was metallic, laced with something wild, something that sank into me like roots. And when I swallowed, the mark on my back flared again, and I felt the bond twist tighter, cleaner, infinite. Then KL turned to the pack. "She is mine," he said. "Not by force, not by war, but by choice, and she has chosen me." I didn't know what I expected, but I didn't expect the silence to break with the sound of knees hitting stone. One by one, they knelt. Ruvan, Mira, the guards, the elders, the wolves, all of them. I stood there, not shaking, not hiding, my hand in Kyl's, and the fire in my chest burning brighter than it ever had before. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a waitress in broken shoes, slipping between tables and hoping no one saw me bleed. I was a queen, and they had seen me rest up. The moon was full the night Kyle took me to the high cliff above the valley. It hung low and silver, a perfect coin pressed into the sky, painting the world in shades of ash and pearl. The trees whispered with frost-bitten wind, but the air wasn't cruel. It was quiet, reverent, as if the land itself had been waiting for this. He walked beside me in silence, his fingers interlaced with mine, bare feet silent over ancient stone. We had said nothing since leaving the estate. No titles, no commands, no ceremony rehearsals, only the bond humming between us like a heartbeat, and the knowledge that this moment was not for them. Not for the pack, not for the bloodlines or the laws. This was for us. The cliff was sacred, older than the estate, older than the packs. The ground beneath it was smooth with age, carved by time and countless oaths whispered into moonlight. Wolves had once come here to swear vengeance, to swear fealty, to swear love. Now we stood in that legacy, adding our names to the stone with nothing but breath and blood. He let go of my hand only when we reached the edge. The valley stretched wide below us, quiet and glimmering under a sky full of stars. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, a long, distant note that felt like a blessing or a witness. Kyle turned to face me. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly, "unless you mean it." I knew what he meant. The pack had already accepted me. I had been named queen before the firelight and the stone. I had drunk from the blood chalice. But this wasn't about titles. This was the truth beneath the ritual, the vow that existed even when no one was watching. And I had never been more certain. I reached up, fingers brushing along the side of his jaw, feeling the tension in him melt beneath my touch. "I'm not here because I was chosen." His brows lifted just slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I'm not standing here because of prophecy, or fire, or fate. I stepped closer until my breath was warm against his throat. I'm here because I chose to stay. He exhaled, slow and full, like he'd been holding that air in his chest for a very long time. I used to think, I whispered, that no one saw me, that maybe I wasn't made to be seen, but then you looked at me like I was a story already half written, and you waited. You let me finish it. His hands came to my waist. You never needed me to finish it. No, I said, but I needed someone who'd still be there when I did. The wind picked up, stirring his hair, catching the edge of the cloak wrapped around my shoulders. Somewhere in the trees, a gust sent dry leaves spiraling into the air, golden and dying and beautiful. He bent his head. I vow, he said, voice low, deep, almost animal, to walk beside you, never ahead, never behind, to follow your fire, to shelter your name with mine. I felt the mark on my back pulse in answer. He reached for the small silver dagger he'd tucked into his belt, a relic from the old world, its hilt inscribed with the crest of the Nightborn line. Without hesitation, he sliced a clean line across his palm. Blood welled, dark and thick and slow. He held it out to me. I vow, I said, taking the dagger from him, to be more than a symbol, more than a bond, to fight beside you, to bleed if I must, to rule not from shadow, but from truth. The blade was sharp, but I didn't flinch. I let it bite across my own palm, the pain sharp and fleeting. I pressed my hand into his. Our blood mixed, and the earth seemed to hum. Somewhere deep in the cliff beneath us, something old stirred and settled, and then he kissed me. Not with urgency, not with the hunger I'd felt before. This kiss was slower, deeper, the kind of kiss that feels like sealing a promise, like glass finally piecing itself together again after being shattered, each fragment turning to light. His mouth was warm against mine, his hand wrapping around the back of my neck, and everything else, pack, prophecy, fire, fear, melted into nothing. Only us. Only this. We stood there long after the kiss broke, still holding hands, palms slick with blood and starlight, our shadows dancing together on the stone behind us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was becoming something new. I felt like I had finally come home,